Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Kesher, and the other one is Sebastian. You can see both of us here under the name Kesher. And I know there are many people here who have heard this few lines many, many times. Thank you for being here once again and for being our members or regulars and attending several Kesher talks. It's lovely to have you all back. But just for the sake of those who are joining us for the first time, I do want to say a couple of words about Kesher and what we do. Kesher means connection in Hebrew, and we decided to give this name to our project 5.5 years ago when we started, because we want to connect between Jewish communities, and we want to show and feel this connection that we all have, no matter where we are in the world. And this is why we decided to share Jewish history, heritage, culture, and also the present day situation of different Jewish communities from all over the world, from different cities, different countries, to get to know about each other. Today, as you all know, we're going to learn about the Jews of Greece. And actually, I see that many people mentioned roads. I just want to already say that Joseph has an entire talk about the Greek islands, and today is more about an overview of the Greek Jewry as a whole. But now, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker of the day, Joseph Michael Vardakis, who is from Athens, Greece. He's a psychologist, but he also used to guide tours, Jewish-themed tours around Athens and research all of Greece and its Jewish history. But as a profession, he's a psychologist now, and he's lived in Israel, in South Africa, in the UK, and in so many other places. So we're very glad to have him here with us once again. And I'll pass the word to share with us about Greek Jewry. If there are any questions, as always, please put them in the chat. And after Joseph's presentation, we'll open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Dora. It really is a pleasure to be here once again. I think the new faces, and I'm excited today to share with you a bit about Greek Jewry. Of course, it is a challenge to put everything in roughly an hour. We're talking about the oldest Jewish community in the Western Hemisphere, probably outside modern-day Iraq, the Mesopotamia. In the West, the Greek Jewish presence dates back more than 2 millennia, so we'll do our best. And in some aspects, we'll put a bit more focus. And as Dora said, thank you. We have two other talks. One that focuses on the community of Salonika, which really needs its own talk to deal with it, and its uniqueness in the Jewish diaspora, and also a talk we're having on Jews in the Greek islands, with the focus on Rhodes, on Corfu and Crete. So I will touch a bit on these topics, but it will be a more general view. So with no further ado, let's start. So okay, just full screen. Okay, so Greece lies in the southeast part of the Mediterranean, literally in the crossroads of Europe with Asia. It was the gateway from the great empires of the East to Europe and also to Africa. So it has a very strategic position, and it's very close to, because it's in the East Mediterranean, it's relatively close to Israel, to the land of Israel. So the first emigrations of the Jews, particularly after the Roman conquest, is to the area of modern-day Greece, which was part of the Hellenic, at the center of the Hellenic Greek-speaking world. There was beforehand their indication that there was a lot of conversing and a connection between Israel and Greece in the Hellenic times. Of course, we have Hanukkah. There were better and worse chapters during that era, but the first specific mention to Jewish presence dates roughly to the first half of the 3rd century BCE. We have an inscription in Greek, which refers to a Judean by the name of Moschon, Moschionos, and some of the first archaeological evidence to Jewish presence roughly at that period is in the ancient Agora in Athens. I don't know who has been there. And with the inscription that you see to your left of a menorah and the Arbata Minin, you see the lulav that is used in Sukkoth. That was a symbol of the Jewish people then. You don't see Magen David, interesting enough, for a long time after. And beyond that, and there we have an indication in the ancient Agora, in the heart of Athens during the Hellenistic time, of a synagogue. And another more famous site is in the island of Delos. It's a tiny island today that it was a bustling city during the Hellenistic period and then the Roman period that had 2 synagogues. You see here to your right this fascinating throne, which is the throne of Moses. This island, by the way, is opposite the island of Mykonos. Whoever would like to will visit the Kyklads and wants a very expensive trip to the Greek Isles, it's worthwhile to do a hop over to Delos and to see this oldest archaeological find of a synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. So the Jewish presence goes way back in time. During that period, the Jews, and from the ancient times through Roman times, through the Byzantine era, we're talking a period of roughly 1,800 years. The Jews in Greece speak Yevanic, a Greek Jewish dialect. They're heavily Hellenized. A lot of them have Greek names. Their synagogues and that influence, of course, have Greek influences. We can see that all the way to modern day Israel. If everyone's been to Caesarea or to Tzipori in the north of Israel, you have the Hellenistic effect on Jewry around the Mediterranean. So this group of Jews, all the way to the 1400s, we'll talk what happens during that period, that dominate the Eastern Mediterranean, are Greek-speaking. They have unique customs. They're very connected to Israel and less to Babylon. So their traditions are different to a lot of other Jewish communities. They're mostly similar to the Italian Jewish communities in terms of rite and religious law. And they, throughout the centuries, they kept Greek in their service. Here you see an ancient document of Agadah, of Pesach, in Hebrew letters in Greek, which is fascinating because I can actually read part of what is written here. It's actually very special. So this is the Yevanic dialect. They are throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, throughout the Greek peninsula. Some interesting customs that you see are the tik. The tik is the Sefer Torah, are usually gold embroidered, but made from wood, as opposed to the Western Sephardi and the Ashkenazi communities that are cloth Sefer Torah. Some other interesting things is the ketubah for the firstborn. There is a form of ketubah it's called the Aleph, and it is a protective amulet document that was put above the infant's bed. So that's something very uniquely Romagnot, right? The Romagnot Jews, the Jews of that era. And the Jewish community, these communities were prominent in Greece till the modern era. The largest concentration of the community, this is from the early 1900s, is a wedding in the northwestern, very big urban center of Yanina, in the northwestern part of Greece. The Jews there kept these Romagnot traditions, and this is one of you see here in the present day, one of the last synagogues in the world that go by the Romaniote rite, by the Romaniote traditions. Another famous community that we'll touch more is in Crete, right? Crete is one of the largest Mediterranean islands. The first European civilization, the Minoan, is there. We have more history about the Jews of Crete than any other island, I think, in the world, more than Cyprus. There's a history that goes back also to millennia. A community that was famous for its rabbis and its Jewish philosophers, famous kosher wine and cheese during the Middle Ages was from Crete, and another Romaniote community of Crete. This is a picture of a Romaniote family in Crete in the early 1900s. Who are holding, by the way, traditional Cretan instruments like the mandolin, the lira. So remember the Romaniote Jews, because in the 1400s we are going to have a mass influx of Jews from the 1300s to the 1500s. We're going to have a mass influx of Jews with the apex of that emigration to the area of modern-day Greece and Turkey in after the expulsion of Spain. So I'm not going to go in detail about what happens in Spain, but King Ferdinand and Isabella, they're kicking the Jews out. More than 90,000, which is about a third of the Jews that are expelled, that do not convert and that are not killed in the process, and that manage to survive the arduous trips, settle in the area of modern-day Greece and Turkey in the Ottoman Empire. And the vast majority of them will settle in the area of northern Greece, Greek islands like Rhodes, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and many other areas. Now, at the same time, in the previous centuries, we have mass expulsions of Jews from France, from Italy, from Hungary and Austria. We have influx. So we have Italian-speaking, French Jews from southern France and from Ashkenaz, particularly from Hungary, that find a home in the areas of northern Greece, particularly in Thessaloniki. And what happens is that in 1492, it's the perfect conditions for the Ottomans, who have just conquered after centuries of fighting with the Byzantines. They've conquered the area. The Byzantine 1,000-year-old empire, Greek-speaking Christian continuation of the Roman Empire, has collapsed in 1453. The land is empty. The cities are destroyed, are depopulated. And here come Jews from Spain, probably the most educated and sophisticated Jewish communities of the Middle Ages, with a lot of know-how that are coming and will repopulate the urban centers. The Jews that are coming, and it's very important to stress it here, the Jews in these areas and the Sephardi Jews are primarily urban. We hardly have any indication of Jews living in villages or in the countryside, as opposed to areas in Poland or in Eastern Europe. So all the urban centers will have influx of Jews, and most of them will settle in Thessaloniki, in Constantinople, in Rhodes, and other areas of Greece. This influx will change the face of the Jewish communities, and the Jewish communities will gradually become more and more Spanish-speaking. They will become Sephardian, right? There is going to be a clash between the old established Romaniote Greek-speaking communities that see that the demographics are changing, and this will continue for the next century, for the 1500s. But in most of modern-day Greece of the time, and in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Sephardim completely take over, except few communities in the southern part of Greece, such as Ioannina, Crete, and some other smaller communities. Now, what you see here is a very interesting thing that will make us understand, especially the situation that we have with Greece of the time, Thessalonica in particular, becoming a heaven for Jews, like we see perhaps in the 19th century in the United States became that and Israel later. So this is these are synagogues with the date of their founding in Thessaloniki. These are the primary synagogues we have till the 1600s. There were more later. Thessaloniki had about 50 to 60 synagogues, central synagogues, by this century. Now, the oldest one in Thessaloniki, which will be the heart of the Jewish community of Greece for more half a millennium, is the Etz Chaim. Etz Chaim, this tree of life, are Romaniot communities, Romaniot synagogues. This is from the 2nd century. This is where Paul will preach when he's talking to the Thessalonians in the New Testament. He had given drashot, speeches in Etz Chaim synagogue. Then you see in white central synagogues indicating the place of origin. Ashkenaz first from Hungary, Provencia from South France in 1394, Italia Yashan, the Italian influx, and from Gerush Sfarad in 1492, you see the Sephardi communities that are the Sephardi communities that will become very prominent. And throughout the centuries, you're going to have influx from, for example, from Jews from Portugal and Marano Jews. As you see, the Shalom Synagogue of 1606 is made of Marano Jews, of Judeo crypto Jews that come from areas that where the Inquisition was in force. And they will settle in the greater communities. Now, in big cities like in Thessaloniki, each community is centered. You have more than 30 communities, Jewish communities, all centered around the synagogue. They have their own court of law. They have their own institutions, their own school, their own all institutions are centered around the synagogue. And for centuries, people are able to relate back to the city of origin or the country of origin that their great-great-grandfathers came from. And this will continue, these autonomous communities will continue in Salonika particularly till the 1800s. Okay. Now, a little bit about about Thessaloniki that we started about, which is at the epicenter of this the period and of Sephardi Jewry in Greece, will be coined Madre de Israel. It's really a Sephardi metropolis. It becomes the most populous Jewish city in the world for about 300 years. There are famous synagogues, yeshivot. It was known for its scholarship till the 1700s. The Jews become the dominant demographic group in Thessaloniki. We should know Thessaloniki is at that time is one of the 5 most populous cities in Europe. It was a central port. And they are found in all the strata of the socioeconomic strata. You have them from bankers, merchants, fishermen, factory workers in the 19th century and 20th century, where we're talking about hundreds of years. Fire, you see here on the bottom, you see fire brigades, Jewish fire brigades, the first factories in Thessaloniki are Jewish owned, like the Alatini factory, which till the very day you can see. The banks are Jewish. The port had, in the early 20th century, had more than 9,000, a guild of 9,000 workers that worked in the port, workers and fishermen. Okay, so the port is Jewish. The biggest port one of the biggest ports in the Mediterranean, closed on Shabbat. If you were of one of the other religious communities, you had, in order to survive, you had to converse in Judeo-Espanol, in Ladino. So this was an unprecedented kind of rule of the Jewish community. And the Jewish press in Thessaloniki, starting from the 1800s, is one of the most proliferous of the Jewish communities in Europe. The lingua franca is Judeo-Espanol. But during this decade, these centuries, it's important, and moving on to the 1800s, the Jews, just to give you a general picture, are under the Ottoman rule, and their fate goes is tightly connected with the fate of the Ottoman Empire. So they're very law-abiding citizens. They are part of a millet of the religious minorities that they have to pay a certain tax for being one of the religious communities under Islam, and they have a form of semi-autonomy. They have to pay their taxes. They are very in the 16th, 17th century as a community. Because of their know-how, especially of the Sfaradim that are bringing the know-how of weaving and of the printing press. These are two major things that they are bringing to the Ottoman Empire, the printing press and weaving technology. They are responsible, for example, the Jewish community of Thessaloniki is responsible for all the uniforms of the Ottoman military. Now, in the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire is already in decline. The Jews are turning more and more towards the West. The languages that the Jews speak, and it's important, when we're talking about Greek Jewry, it will be hard to generalize because we have the Romaniot Greek-speaking Jews, they're a minority. We have the Sephardim that are a majority, big majority, and they are conversing in Spanish, Judeo-Spanish, Judeo-Espanol, but increasingly they are the middle and upper middle class are sending their kids to French schools, and as we're going to the end of the 19th and 20th century, Hebrew becomes more prominent, and language, religious identity, and roots are interplay. And Thessaloniki is one of those unique examples of a truly multicultural city-state. So much so that something that I don't think I've mentioned in the Zionist movement, one of what the Jewish community had suggested that Thessaloniki would become this Zionist or this Jewish protectorate as a city. So their identity, for example, in Thessalonica was, okay, we are from Salonika, and this is a Jewish city. This was an official suggestion to make the area of northern Greece a heaven for Jews coming from, at the time, from the pogroms of Eastern Europe, of Russia. So the Jewish community is conversing in all these languages, and their cultural backgrounds might be Romaniot, might be Italian, might be Ashkenazi from Hungary, from Austria, or from Russia in the 1800s. Or from different backgrounds in Spain, and all with variance in their traditions, and this differs from community to community, of course. A little bit about the religious life. The Jewish communities are till the late 19th century are defined by the religious observance, and under the Ottoman rule, there were religious communities. They were not citizens of a country, of a nation state, and their rights differed from the Sephardim to the Romaniot to the Italian-speaking Jews in the western part of Greece, particularly, or to the Ashkenazim that were kept their traditions also. But of course, this changed. The religious observance changes in the 20th century. From especially the upper middle class that goes to more get secular education, and this will become more and more marked as the 20th century progresses. Will become less and less observant. However, it's important to say that in Greece, the Jewish communities were traditional, like in most Sephardi or Mediterranean communities. There might have been a socialist or communist or a Zionist or or any other adapt any other of ism of the time, but they held their traditions. They held their traditions, but perhaps less. There was less that kind of religious divide that split part of Ashkenazi Jewry that we see in Eastern Europe or in Germany at the period. And here you see actually on a rare photo from the Romagnot synagogue in the island of Corfu, with Italian influence, but it's a Romagnot synagogue. You see one of the Chazanim. This is in the 1930s. Their taleth were usually made out of silk, old talitot that you saw in Greece. I think in Italy it was also that, but I'm not certain. And a little bit about, to paint a picture of the life. One beautiful thing that we see in many of the Greek communities is how they celebrated Purim. So in most cities, you used to have the famous play of Esther with competitions, where people were in almost every community of who would dress in the most interesting way for Purim. And this actually, I think, on the left, on the right, bottom right, is from the community of Larissa, one of the biggest Sephardi communities in central Greece. Here on the top right, we have an image of two kids from a Romagnot community that are dressed like in traditional Greek attire of that period from the city of Yanina. So the traditions also, they were colorful. They were full of music, and everyone was kind of involved in the life cycle and in the year cycle. Here you have a wedding in the 1930s in Salonika. The weddings would take place in the synagogue. This is from, I'm not exactly sure, but one of the Italian synagogues. Italian, when we say Italian, is Jews that had come back hundreds of years earlier from some Italian communities. And here you have a beautiful ketubah from Corfu. Another interesting thing to understand a little bit about the music, again, we're generalizing, it would depend on what community you are related to and what are the influences. In the West, the influences were more from Italy, but in most of Greece, the influences were more from the Byzantine Empire, from Ottoman influences, and also Spanish sound and the Spanish language that they were being used. So we are going to actually hear part of a famous song from Thessaloniki, which is called There Were Three Sisters. I'm sure some of you have heard this, Tres Hermanitkas Eran. We're going to hear it from a rendition by a famous Greek singer in the 1990s. It was one of the first projects. And you see this musical group from the early 20th century, still in traditional costume in Thessalonica. So this features also in this musician's cover. On the left, there is a famous figure in Greek music, in Greek, what's called rembetiko, the Greek underground blues music of the 1930s. And one of the central figures her name was Rosa Ashkenazi, a tragic hero, a tragic character, survived the Holocaust, was hid by, she was at the center of this movement, this rebetiko underground music and their sound. So there's Jewish influence also in temporary Greek music. But let's hear a little bit about a typical Sephardi song that talks about love and the tragedy and the romance. Okay, it's also something uniquely Sephardi. In the Sephardi communities, we have a lot in the majority of the songs that were being sung in whether it was in weddings or in other were of secular themes, So let's. I'm going to share. I'm going to share with you our song. We're going to hear a little bit of it, and of course the link I think Dora will share of this. Okay, all right, let's hear. If you notice, you see a picture of the same trio of this group by Savita Yiannatou, and you here have the old port of Salonika. This was a famous album in the 1990s. And all the songs here are from Thessaloniki. So that was a bit. I will share you the song. Beautiful. The tunes here combine Ottoman to Byzantine to Sephardi, Spanish sounds. Beautiful song that talks about three sisters, and one of them was had disappointed her family, had fallen into some form of trouble, perdition, and her father kind of sent her to the island of Rhodes. So it talks about they built a castle around her, and that's where she will find this kind of new love. This is the story of this woman. So a little bit about the attire of the Jewish communities. We'll look at some Romagnot and some Sephardi attire. This is again to the start of the modern era of the 20th century, where things will change. Modernity, Western influences will sweep through. The Jewish communities, the Greek communities in the Ottoman Empire first, that are the first to be influenced by the Enlightenment, by the West, by many movements that are coming to the Ottoman Empire, and will influence the Christian minorities of the Ottoman Empire, the Greeks, firstly, and the Jewish communities. Now, the traditional attire here, you have a photograph of a young Jewess from Yanina in typical holiday dress that is similar to what Greek women would wear in the area of northwestern Greece at the time, in the let's say up to the late 1800s. And what is most interesting is the attire of the Sephardi women of Salonika, which was only unique to Salonika. If you look at photo archives from other Sephardi communities in the Ottoman Empire, they don't look anything like what we see in Salonika. In Salonika, the Jewish women kept some influences of Castilian and Spanish costumes of the noble women of the period, all the way to the 19th century, with modifications, of course, and their elaborate headwear, long hair that were partly uncovered on the back. Men wore a more typical attire of Jews with the fez, which you have around. A lot of them were wearing beards, all the way especially the more traditional ones, and the coats with a fair lining. So very Ottoman, but also distinguish them from the Muslims. And this is a picture of the famous Saadia family, prominent Sephardi family, and there's a whole story about this family actually that we've attached all the way to the United States, prominent businessmen, and then authors and the journalists, that whole family. These are the great-grandparents. And the Saadia family, that there's a great book about this family. And here you see typical dress from Salonika in the early 20th century. But of course, the 20th and late 19th century, there's a shift. This is also from the Jewish community of Yanina, and also from Yanina, the more Western, more affluent members who were influenced from the Western school education. Often they were educated in France and in Germany, are coming back with new attire. And this is actually a Salonican family in 1905. It's actually interesting to see. I don't know if we can actually see it. The resolution is not the best, but you actually see a family where the mother is still with you can see with the traditional attire of Sephardi women in Salonika, whereas the rest of the family is already in Western attire. Okay, so there is this big shift. Now, part of the shift in identity, also where the Jews belong. Are we in the West, or are we in part of this Ottoman Empire that is collapsing around us? Are we Jewish, Sephardi? Are we identified by our political beliefs of the time? That's when socialism is coming and Zionism is coming, and with religion and what identifies the Jewish communities, what are its identity pillars. That is going to be something that's going to be in flux and will really is really characteristic of communities that are really at crossroads of huge changes, and between nation state, between being part of an empire, religious community, part of an empire, to being citizens of a nation state, which will be Greece. Now, a bit of context here. In the by 1912, the Greek War of Independence that had taken place almost a century later has spread throughout the area of the peninsula of modern-day Greece. And over that century, the Greeks have taken more and more territory from the Ottomans. The Ottomans have been pushed back almost out of Europe. And in 1912, the Greeks enter Salonika, which will become suddenly the biggest Jewish population in Greece and the biggest city in Greece. Athens at the time was relatively small. It is the urban center, is the biggest port, and they're coming into a Jewish majority city. The biggest city in Greece is Jewish majority. So that in itself is going to be complex. The Jews, as I said, were very loyal to the Ottomans for hundreds of years, even though they were second-class citizens, even though there were times when things were not rosy. Overall, their rights were protected by the Ottomans, and they didn't want to rock the boat. So when that happened, this transition happened. That transition wasn't simple. And it depends where you were. The Jews, the Greek-speaking Jews of areas such as Yanina welcomed the Greeks. They have common language. And the Greek government from the onset officially gave the status to its Jewish communities, recognized status in the constitution and as equal citizens. That does not mean there was an anti-Semitism. That does not mean that things would be relatively easy for the Jews. But it also meant that for the first time, the government would have a say, in how the Jewish communities were being run to a certain extent. And Salonika, the Jews were very skeptical of that, and there was a lot of accusations, and many of them did not want to be part of this new uncertainty of being part of the new Greek state. That combined with a huge fire that takes place, as you see, aerial photo, in 1917, a few years after the Greeks have entered the city, burns here you see the port of Salonika, burns the heart of the city. 30 synagogues are burnt, huge archives are burned, 50,000 Jews are left homeless. And that will be a pivotal point to the transition of the city to a more Hellenic, Greek-speaking city, which was something that the authorities wanted, and a modernization of the city. So there was a big kind of destruction of this heart of Sephardi Jewry, and this was another challenge. So many Jews emigrate in this interim period. Also, new laws such as Sunday becoming the national day, the official day of rest, which really challenged and hit hard economically the Jewish community, led to immigration during the 1920s and 1930s. And because of that, not knowing, of course, what the tragedy what would meet the Greek Jewish communities, many Jews left for Israel, particularly for the United States, for France. And this is something that happens. Yet, despite these tribulations, the Jewish community, especially in Salonika and in other places in Greece, finds its footing and shifts also its identity. Okay, this is again showing a shift from from the early 1900s to 1930s. Another typical Jewish family from the 1930s in Salonika. Now, being part of a Greek state and being Greek citizens was a shift. And we're talking the shift also linguistically, also culturally, also in terms of identity. So the Greek Jews that grew up in the 1930s, even in areas Salonika where the lingua franca was Ladino, are starting to speak more and more in Greek as the first language. And this is an image of the Cohen Brigade in the start of World War II, in the fight against the Axis, the fascist powers of Italy that invade. So thousands of Jews are enlisted there, and it's quite indicative. And if we see it there, the letters, how they're relating to being part of, this patriotic, you see very patriotic sentiment. They're feeling more and more that they're Greek. That generation before World War II. But it's important to remember that this is a relatively short period for most Greek Jews. So an exemplary case is that of the Colonel Mordechai Frizis, the highest-ranking Jewish officer in pre-World War II Europe. I know personally his family. And he's a national hero in Greece with a lot of recognition, particularly in the past decade. In the past decade, he was the first officer to fall during the war against the Axis powers. A famous story, he grew up in a Roman youth community in the Chalkis, one of the most ancient.
That
Yes.
was not a serious invitation. I could not imagine y'all would ever want to go see ZZ Top.
Okay.
Sorry, I
Okay. I
think that
think
was
it
not
wasn't.
for us.
Yeah, it wasn't for us. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so he grows up in Chalkida in southern Greece, uh, in an ancient Roman community, and he's part of he served a crucial role, and he was a very proud Jew. He was also a very proud, very patriotic Greek during the war against the Turks. One of the wars against the Turks in the 1920s. He was captured. And he refused to be released before his soldiers were released. So he was a very prominent figure. And to this day, he symbolizes the kind of shift into of Jews that felt very patriotic, of being Greek and integrating, even though it wasn't easy also for him in the start to get to where he got. He faced discrimination in the start, but then he got accepted. And there's a very special story that he actually uh, he fell from his horse. He would refuse to galvanize his soldiers. He refused to get down off his horse during the attack, during aerial attack, and he was killed. And during his dying moments, a priest said Shema Yisrael to him. They didn't have a rabbi, and so a very special story of Mordechai Frizis. Now, we're reaching this dark chapter of Greek Jewry, World War II. After initial success of the Greeks pushing back the Italians, the Germans come to their aid in 1941 after almost half a year of resistance, of the Greeks having kind of pulled back. And to help them, the Germans attack. Basically what they do is they split Greece into three spheres of influence, three occupations. What you see in blue are the Italian areas of occupation, which is most of southern and central Greece. The red parts are German rule, and you have in the far north of part of Greece in green, you have the Bulgarian occupation, which was also part of the Axis. Now, where the Jews were where they were really affected their fate. The Germans implemented, the Germans focused first of all in Thessaloniki, and there was a reason for that. The majority of the Greek Jewry is in northern Greece, as you see, and center in Thessaloniki. At that period, just to give you numbers, at that period, the start of a century, there's about 100,000 Jews in Greece. By early World War II, there are about 80,000 Jews in Greece, and there are 56,000 in Thessaloniki, down from about 90,000 in the start of the century, 55,000. And the Germans occupy this area, and their rule starts. The measures, the anti-Semitic measures, start in Thessaloniki. This has been planned. The Germans from the late 1930s there are indications that they were in Thessaloniki, fact-finding missions to kind of to understand a lot about this community. So they implement the first measures, anti-Semitic measures, only a year later, in 1941. 1941, in the summer of 1941, in what's called an infamous Black Shabbat, they gather all adult males, or adult males, I think, to the age of 60, in Thessaloniki, about 11,000 men, to the central square, what's called the Freedom Square in Thessaloniki, during the scorching sun, and they have them going through arduous exercises. The onlooking, the non-Jews around, the locals are seeing this. This is the start of the anti-Semitic measures against the Jewish community in Thessaloniki. The persecution has many stages. The Jews are put to two major ghettos. As you know, I'm sure you know from other places in Europe, they are forced to wear the Magen David. Everything, their archives are confiscated. The Jews are forced. A lot of the Jewish soldiers who had fought in the front with Italy are arrested and are sent to work camps in Greece. The Germans forced the Jewish community to pay them an exorbitant amount of millions of drachmas at the time. The amount was astronomical to return the young Jewish men from work. And there are more and more basic rights of the Jewish community are taking effect. Of course, the Jews felt in Greece, it's important to say, even in Salonika, they felt really this is a Jewish city. They felt, I don't know if they felt invincible at the start, but they really felt for a long time that, okay, this can't reach us also. And what is happening, they were hearing what was happening in Northern Europe, but they could not imagine that it would, where it would go. Now, the persecution will start and the first shipments, the first trains to the concentration camps are in 1943, in the spring of 1943. In Thessaloniki, you have about 18 train loads of about 48,000 Jews. And in the rest of Greece that following year, in the following months. In the following year, this is a famous album from a cold March Shabbat day in Yanina, in the epicenter of Roman Jewry, that has been found. One noteworthy and very tragic chapter that I think is worthwhile to look in more detail is in the Jewish cemetery in Salonika. So the Salonika necropolis was the largest Jewish cemetery in the world, larger than in Warsaw, if people have been to Poland. More than 500,000 known graves. The size was about, if you can imagine, cover terrain of roughly 80 American football fields. And this was at the heart of Salonika. Salonika had spread over the previous decades. And as you can see to the left, you're seeing this mass expanse of graves. And at the background, you have the new Aristotelian University, the biggest university at the time in Greece and in the Balkans. And the Greek authorities had really been adamant for decades with the Jewish community to relocate the graves according to Christianity and in Greek Orthodoxy, graves are moved, and that's the norm in cities. So there wasn't that much, and there had been parts of the cemetery that have been removed under the Ottomans, and then under some had been given, and there was lots of interventions and legal battles with the Jewish community and with the authorities in Salonika, but to no avail. So the Germans come, and as we know, we don't have indication that the Nazis destroyed graves and cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries. We see it throughout Europe. But here we have the perfect storm. We have a very willing authorities that are desperate to get rid of this expansive cemetery, and they find very willing ears in the Nazi authorities. This is a picture of before and after. This is taking place before the Jews are removed. Okay, just see the level of destruction in a small part of that cemetery. The destruction was so extensive You see here a picture of a rabbi in traditional rabbinic dress attire in 1943. Before the Jews are expelled, they're seeing their dead being dug up, the graves destroyed, the community, and this was part of the DNA of the community. It was their history and their heritage going back millennia. This was so extensive that the Germans used it to build here. You see, to build through the grave stones to build swimming pools. They were everywhere. They were found in private homes. They were used for pavements. I personally saw in one of the biggest UNESCO heritage site of St. Dimitrios Basilica, one of the old basilica, that I saw in the yard. As you see to the far left, I walked in and I saw still tombs with Hebrew writing from that era. So throughout the city, they were used for all kinds of buildings. So another tragic chapter, that story before the end of this grand community. But with this and with places in Salonika where the authorities turned a blind eye or often collaborated in projects like this and finding opportunity to get rid of the Jewish competition or the Jewish presence, which at the time was about 25%, down from about 60% in the start of the century. It was about 25% of the city, but still very prominent community. In other parts of Greece, and that's why it's hard to generalize also, there were different stories according to the communities, according to what the local authorities or what community leaders, Jewish and Christian, decided to do. So here you have some of the most prominent Greek Christian leaders, especially from the church. You have on the bottom left, you have Chrysostomos, which was the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church from Athens and the head of the Greek police in Athens, that forged documents that saved thousands of Jews in the Greek capital. On the top left, you have the mayor, Karer, and the bishop, the Archbishop of the island of Zakynthos, which is in the western part of Greece, where famously, when the Germans asked them for a list of the Jews of the island, part of their resistance and their statement was that they gave a list of two names, which was the list of the mayor, the name of the mayor, and the name of the bishop. In that island, every single Jew was hidden by the local Christian population in Zakynthos and survived the war. In Athens, most of the Jewish community survived. There were other places that the local communities, the local authorities did very little to help their the Jewish citizens, the Jewish population. And of course, you also had a Jewish leadership that was key to which communities were saved. In Salonika, in a city, a big Jewish community in central Greece, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Pesach, a famous rabbi, Romaniot rabbi, led the Jewish community, collaborated with the partisans, and most of the Jewish community survived. So a lot of the Jews, many of the Jews, about 9,000 Jews survived by hiding in the mountains with the partisans. Famous Jewish partisan from that era. And these are images of a family in Zakynthos, in that island, post-World War II, that survived, that was hidden by local communities and local Christians. And on the right is also the Nachmias family, a family from Yanina, where the kids were hidden in Athens in Christian homes for the period of the war and survived And you see the girl to the right wrote a book about a beautiful book about the Jewish community of Yanina. She passed away last year, Nina Nachmias. So the Jews are shipped to the camps primarily to Auschwitz. Most Greek Jews are shipped to Auschwitz, and the Jews in the Bulgarian territories are shipped to Treblinka. The Bulgarian Jews, most of the Jews won't survive, around 98 to 99%. But the Greek prisoners, in the camps are quite known. They were a unique group because they didn't speak Yiddish. So the Nazis they felt because they were isolated, because linguistically and linguistically primarily, they use them as Sonderkommando. They use them for in the ovens after because they use them. They use them in the crematoria. So about half the Jews in the crematoria were Greek Jews, and they were very key in the resistance. So we have a figure, Alberto Herrera, you see to your left from Larissa, Sephardi Jews, that has the only documented 4 photos of we have from what was happening in the crematoria. So this is a second picture that he managed to kind of to take and smuggle out of what was happening. You have another member, Salamo Aruch and Baruch. These are, sorry, there's an, okay, I'm missing one image. And these Jews were instrumental in the crematorium revolt of October 7th. The October 7th revolt that was headed by Greek Jews and Polish Jews. By October 7th, 1944, they blow up the crematorium, the biggest revolt by the Jews that were working in the crematoria. And it was really an example of that resistance, that spirit of resistance that really kind of was very typical of this, especially of these Salonican Jews that were there, so far away from home. So we have this very special story. It's worthwhile to see. Now a little bit about the legacy and what happened in the Holocaust in Greece, a bit of the numbers. So in 1941, there were 80,000 Jews in Greece. By 1945, it's down to 9,000 Jews, one of the highest percentages of losses. And in Thessaloniki, there are less than 2,000 Jews that survive. This is more than 96% loss. In Thessalonica, the community was completely destroyed. Their properties were taken. And the few survivors that came found their homes occupied with legal battles for decades. Many imagine a city that was with the Jewish presence was everywhere. But there was efforts to rebuild. So this is a picture of mass weddings we see quite a few mass weddings after World War II. This is taken in Athens by couples that have survived, and as you see in the background, the flag of the State of Israel. Most of them will emigrate to Palestine of the time. In 1946 and 47, for a lot of Jews, it was very, very hard, especially to go back to their communities that were completely obliterated. This is another image of in the Athens community of a mass wedding after. So gradually, the communities are being rebuilt. This is at the inauguration of a synagogue in Athens, headed by the Rabbi Barzilai, who is another key figure in saving the Jews of Athens and collaborating with authorities and going to the mountains. So the Jewish community was also with help from external sources from the United States. and from local philanthropists, built itself up. This is from the Jewish school in the suburb of Athens in the 1960s. And today, at the present stage, we have 6 surviving Jewish communities. The three major ones are in Athens, where the majority of the Jews, about roughly 3,000 Jews, are to be found, which is it's the capital. Most opportunities are in Athens, with schools, with institutions, with 2 synagogues. The Sephardi synagogue Bet Shalom, Kal Shalom, and the Etz Chaim synagogue, which is opposite this modern-looking synagogue, which is a Roman synagogue. And you also have the second largest community in Thessaloniki. It's roughly 1,000 Jews today, surviving with 2 synagogues, 2 active synagogues, and institutions. They have a elementary school and a heavy legacy this is the one of the few the only surviving synagogue in Thessaloniki today. And shortly, because I think we're reaching the end, right? This is from a trip I had done some time back in this small city in the north of Greece, Veria. It's a community that goes back 2,000 years, Romani community, where it became a Sephardi community in the 1500s. Small city today. I go to the Juderia, to the Jewish quarter. You see to the right, this synagogue. It's built on a site of a synagogue that goes back 2 millennia. To the right, to the left, you see a house of the teacher of the Jewish community that has been renovated. It's like you went back in time and the Jews had just left. So the local authorities, the municipality, have done a lot of effort to preserve the architecture of the Jewish neighborhood there. So you see a lot of inscriptions in Hebrew. Perhaps we can see here close a lot of inscriptions of the date that it was built. And it just felt eerie when I was there, how you saw the bright colors, and it could be just yesterday. You see to the right that there were Jewish students there, Jewish students that were learning there. It was just if it was yesterday, but it was a community also of about 800 members that completely disappeared. Now, a little bit about today, the present day reality. Today is a bit different because we're after October 7th. A lot has happened since in terms of Jewish presence, anti-Semitism. It's always been a battle, right, between in many communities all over the world. We see it on the top left. You see the mayor of Thessaloniki by the name of Boutari. He's a famous winemaker. Became a mayor. He was this rebel kind of child who remembered that his grandfather's wines, one of the most famous wineries in Greece with a lot of international prizes, the wines had kashrut and were written in Greek and Ladino. So he remembers that. He remembers Salonika, that his grandfather was telling him of Salonika that was multicultural, and you could hear that he had Jewish friends. So he comes into office, and at the same time you had, in the post-crisis, you had a surge of the far right in Greece with the Golden Dawn, which is a far right, extreme far right, anti-immigrant party. And here you see as a protest, he's wearing the sign when there was a member of this Golden Dawn in the municipality council. To the right, you see a very famous figure of the Greek Jewish community, the first Jewish mayor in Greece, from Yanina. He was in Yanina. He just passed away last year. Famous professor, Moises Eliasaf, and he became the mayor of Yanina. So you had this battle of forces. The leader of the far right is in prison right now. And today the struggle is with with anti-Semitism have resurfaced, but have a new face, that's more focused against Israel. So it's also a battle, I suppose, of ideas. Here we have, finally, there's going to be a museum, a Holocaust museum in Thessaloniki that is being built right now, that resembles the tombstones of the cemetery. And you have in Athens, this is a symbol of the broken Jewish communities, like the start in every direction, and in every direction you have the communities, different Jewish communities. So this was shortly something short about Greek Jewry, and I'm really looking forward to hear from you, to answer whatever I'm able to answer. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you for this beautiful presentation and sharing so much in such a short time about such an important and big community. Thank you for that. And of course, thank you everyone for being here. We want to let you know that with your contributions to Kesher, you're also donating to the American Sephardi Federation. So thank you also for that. And please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, or you can also raise your hand. And we'll try to answer as many as we can in the time we have. So there was a question, if you could give us the name of the book about the Saadia family.
Yeah,
And
I'll
if it's in
give it to you
English.
shortly. I'll give it to you shortly. The name is, if I'm not mistaken, I will. Give me 1 second. I have it here in my notes. Yes, the name is. 1 second. I'm looking for it. Brothers, I will look into it. I have the notes about them, but about the
You can
Sadi
also send
family,
it to
I
us
will send
after
it.
the talk.
I think the link I've shared, but yeah, I can share it with you.
Okay, you can send it to us after the
Of
talk.
course.
As always, tomorrow we'll send out follow-up information with resources, book suggestions,
Fantastic.
and the music that Joseph shared in the talk. So we will try to add this also to the list. And let me see if there are other questions. I saw another book recommendation from Nancy, who found in a small shop the cookbook of the Jews of Greece. So we'll also include this into the follow-up information. Thank you, Nancy, for sharing this with us. What happened to the Molho family bookstore in Thessaloniki? Michael asks,
So,
who remembers this from the 80s?
right, it was a very famous. So the Molcho family is a famous Sephardi family from Thessaloniki. That we have famous Rena Molcho, which is a historian that's worthwhile to follow. Rena Molcho, a Greek Jewish historian from Thessaloniki. I don't think it's. I'm not sure if it's. I was under the impression that it's still open. I don't know because it is a historic bookstore, but I'm not sure under what ownership. We'll have to check.
Thank you. I see many comments about congratulating you mostly, and also some
Thank you so much.
sharing
Yes, I'm serious.
some
Touching.
personal stories. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Meryl, go ahead. You can unmute. We cannot hear you at the moment, so you can unmute yourself and
Okay.
okay.
We can't hear
I'm
you.
waiting
We
for
can't hear you.
Meryl, who was raising her hand to
Can you hear?
unmute. But in the meantime, if there are other questions, feel free. Lisa.
Lisa, see.
Yes. Hello. This is my first time with your organization. I actually was in Greece this past week, and I do have a question for you. We were in Yanina, and we went to the Kahila Kadosha
Yeah.
synagogue, and we had a conversation with Allegra Matza.
Allegra Matzah, of course.
Yes, yes. And can is there a Jewish, well, she talked about the existing Jewish community, but she didn't really elaborate on like
Okay.
who they are.
So, in you are talking particularly about the community in Yanina. So the community Yanina is now it's only 60 Jews right now. It's one of the official communities in Greece, but it's down in World War II there were about 2,000. Start of the century were about double of that. Many emigrated to the United States. They built the Kalkadosh Yanen that you have in New York, which is the only other surviving. There's one in Nachlaot in Jerusalem, but that's the only other Romaniot synagogue and Roman community, and there's only 60 Jews now. Yeah.
So are they families? Are they young
There are a few
adults?
families.
Are
There are a few
they,
families.
yeah?
They're mostly the families, but they're old. The communities are getting older. The population is getting older. So I don't know what's the prognosis here of these communities.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
not easy.
Thank you, Lisa. Meryl, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What was the name of the World War I general who was such a brave
World War
hero?
I and World War II. His name was Mordechai Frizis or Mordocheos. Frizis is the surname. It's Frizis. You can find him, Colonel Frizis.
Yeah. And then
There's
there
a
was
lot
one in
written
World
about
War
him.
II. I didn't catch
That's
this.
the one. That's the one. He
okay.
just from World War I to World War II. Yeah, he was senior.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Someone mentioned something about I saw in the comments, Dora, about anti-Semitism, uniques of
Yeah,
anti-Semitism.
but before we get to that question, I just
Okay.
cannot
All right.
help to mention that actually it's the granddaughter of Mordechai Frizis who introduced us to Joseph because she's a good friend of mine
Sure.
and of Joseph. So I just wanted to bring her presence, Victoria Frizis, also into the
Of course.
conversation. And
Absolutely,
yes,
yeah.
so there is a question from Ruth. Do you think there is anything exceptional about Greek anti-Semitism? For example, the practice of burning Judas at
Oh,
Easter
okay.
and yelling, "Kill the Jews." She says she lived in Greece 40 years ago and that there is a lot of everyday anti-Semitism of this sort, if you can comment on that.
I don't know if there's something unique about it. It is a complex answer. It is a complex answer. The custom of the Judas burning, as the effigy of Judas, was something that was outlawed by the Greek Orthodox Church in the late 1800s because of its clear anti-Semitic undertones. As the tradition, right? So anti-Semitism was mostly, like in most of Europe, was based on religion for most of the time. The Jews and the Christians were under the Ottomans also defined as religious groups, so there was antagonism between these groups. There were similar resentments, perhaps, about the Jews in some positions, financial positions in the Ottoman era. But overall, it really depends on the communities. The Jews fared relatively well in terms of other parts of Europe. So in most places, it wasn't malignant anti-Semitism, but you could say it was also protection from the local authorities, because there were examples of anti-Semitic events, particularly in Corfu in 1891. There was a blood libel, and there was over the Middle Ages. There were some other cases, but it was less pronounced than in the Byzantine era and in the Ottoman era. The Jews were relatively protected. So this is the reality. Modern era, you have the nationalistic, nationalistic anti-Semitism that you saw. There were places in Greece that Jews integrated pretty well. But in places where they were very dominant, like in Thessaloniki, there was a lot of antagonism and there was anti-Semitism. And I will talk about it a lot more about when I talk about Thessalonica. And in Salonika, it was it was also, so yeah, there are these traditions, these customs. To tell you from my experience, there is a shift, a positive shift in Greece over the past decades in the Jewish community. But now you have this resurgence of anti-Zionism, right, in parts of the political sphere that have really been worrying. And we're seeing that they're also not as intensely as perhaps in some other parts of Europe, but it's still present. Yeah, I'm not denying it. But I should also add that in the past 2 decades, there's been plethora of research and podcasts and books that are written by Greeks on Greek Jewry. It's something that was, that especially in places of Salonika, which is a sensitive subject, to have, a city that was a Jewish city, and and suddenly everyone forgot that 30% of the city was Jewish. There's a lot of attempts to bring that in education, in school system, in research. There's a lot of that. So there's definitely a positive trends, I think. But there's also been a backlash against what's happening in Israel, against the community. So yeah, that's in short. But I don't see something uniquely Greek in that, to answer it.
Thank you. And Ruth added that the Judas burning was outlawed.
There are places that was considered it's a tradition, and and it's not now that saying it's not anti-Semitic. It's like it's a tradition we had for hundreds of years, and there is still cases that you have that. Yeah.
Thank you. Bill?
There we go. My wife and I actually live in Athens, and our experience. My wife has been here for 50 years. We're both American Jews. I think our experience with anti-Semitism is that, to the extent we've experienced it, it's ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that there were 9 Jewish communities in Greece. Of course, I know the Athens Jewish community and Thessaloniki and Ioannina. I assume
9 or 7. So yeah,
Rhodos and Hania.
There are 3 more. There are a few more.
Tell me.
The third biggest community is in Larissa. You have Larissa and Volos.
Yes.
And Larissa is third largest community. It's a quite a robust community of a few hundred Jews, and they're quite. They had a big. There was a renovation of the synagogue that was a few months ago, famous Sephardi synagogue that was renovated. There's a lot of celebration around that. So there are some other examples, but most of the communities are very small. Like Rhodes and Corfu are a few dozens, right? And Chania is, I don't know if it's considered community. So I don't know. It's not 9. I think it's 7.
I went to a Shabbat service at the synagogue in Hania.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. When I talk about the islands, it's a very special story. Hania, the Hania synagogue. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So Michael says if you could share briefly this story of Hania, and maybe we will close with that
So Hania Jewish community, you saw a picture of this family, beautiful family in the early 1900s from Hania. So really old community. The community abruptly ended in 1944 when the Germans basically shipped everyone, the Jews, a few hundred Jews that were in Crete, mostly in Hania. They shipped them on a boat, and the British torpedoed this ship. It had prisoners also of war. So every Jew, except like 2, I think, in Crete, drowned. on the way to Athens to the camps. So this Greek Jewish historian and intellectual by the name of Nikos Stavroulakis, who is, if you just look him up, he passed away a few years ago. He found the Jewish Museum of Greece, the first Jewish cookbook of Greece. He did dozens of research. He was in Oxford University and then in Greece. So he took it a mission to repair the Chania synagogue in the 1990s. But he wanted a place where people from different faiths, different denominations could come and be part of it, yet at the same time making clear that this is a synagogue and there's a right. But so he went with he had reconnected to Judaism. He says he came in for a shachrit, for the morning prayer, by himself, and then gradually people coming, Jews, non-Jews, and he created a community with a lot of funding and with a lot of to build and a lot of research. He rebuilt the building that had been desolate for 60 years, and around that, Jewish people and non-Jewish people from around the world found this unique community. So yeah, it's a fascinating story, but it was a one-man vision that kind of changed a bit the history and brought a bit of Jewish identity and Jewish presence in this island, but all thanks to this person. Yeah, so that's in short. So check out Chania. There's documentaries. There's a lot about this synagogue.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing also this story. I think it's a beautiful way to end our conversation today. Okay. Okay, so the last question before we say goodbye. What do you think would be a good amount of time to visit Athens or Thessaloniki to see the Jewish sites?
Yeah, well, it depends how many communities. If you go to the islands, or Rhodes or Corfu are also worthwhile, or create one of these three communities to see if you could. That would obviously increase the days because you have flights. But if it's Athens and Thessaloniki, I would do Athens. Athens, you have the Jewish Museum. You don't have that. You have the community, the synagogue. You can find information and send to the Jewish community for someone to give you a tour. You don't have a lot of presence if you're walking in the streets of Athens. But in Thessaloniki, you need 3 days. 2 to 3 days at least to get a tour guide, to visit a lot of the sites. A walking tour is important in Thessaloniki to be able to see, because the city changed a lot post World War II. So to have someone that would show you where places are, but wherever you look, whatever street, and if you have the eye for it, there's a lot to see. So 3 days in Thessaloniki, I'd say more days in Thessaloniki than Athens if you're going exclusively for the Jewish side. And I would choose along the way, because there's 6 hours drive on the highway, I would choose to go to Chalkida. Yeah, I'm adding this here in the chat. Chalkida, which is one of the oldest synagogues in the Western Hemisphere. Chalkida, that's where Mordechai Friz is from. And yeah, Chalkida, or I would also visit Veria, that I showed in the PowerPoint, which is near Thessaloniki. If you want to see one other community, go to Veria. There's a lovely Greek lady that has taken upon herself to show for free to any visitors about the community of Veria. It's beautiful, very unique experience about Veria. So I would say a week. Roughly.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you, everyone, for the questions and your curiosity and the comments and suggestions. We really appreciate it. And as always, tomorrow you'll receive follow-up information from us. So we hope to see you soon. And this week we actually have quite a few talks coming up. On Tuesday, we'll have a talk about the Jews of Denmark. On Thursday, about the Jews of Bessarabia, which is today's Moldova and Kishinev. And next week, at the same time as today, on Sunday, we'll have a free event of the Jews of the Balkans, which is, again, a huge topic, and it will be a bit of an overview. And we, of course, have talks about each of those places, but this one will be more of a general overview of the Balkans. Thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Joseph, for sharing once again your knowledge and
It
stories.
was a pleasure, as always. All the best to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, and Shabbat Tov.
What of?